Hello, everyone. I am Catherine Mattice, founder and CEO of Civility Partners. We're going to talk about burnout today, and Sharon and I are going to talk about our books. So there's that. We read each other's books, and so we wanted to talk about how awesome we were. No, I'm just kidding. So let me introduce you, Sharon, and then you can introduce yourself. So Dr. Sharon Grossman. She actually, I've never heard of this. So kudos to you. You self-published your book and then it got picked up by Johns Hopkins. So that's pretty cool. And you're the Burnout Doc. You're a psychologist, an executive coach, and a sought-after speaker specializing in helping executives break free from burnout. How did you get focused on that topic specifically, the burnout topic?
Well, so I actually started out as a therapist, right? So I was doing therapy and I had a lot of high achievers and they were all like really stressed out. And I was teaching them all kinds of strategies and things. And then I eventually made the switch over from just kind of whoever walks in the door to really more like executives. And I thought, like, what is something that they all struggle with that I can help them with? And burnout just kind of came up. And this was back in, I don't know, 2015, 2016, something like that. So like, I didn't even know what burnout was. Like, I never even heard that term, but I was like Googling and I was doing all the things. And then I realized like burnout's actually just what happens when you have chronic stress. And I'm like, I help people with that all day long. So it just kind of made sense. And then I put all the things that were helpful to my clients together. And it became this like step-by-step process that I now teach. So
that's very cool. And you have 7 steps for dealing with it, or at least 7 tips. Talk. The first one's emotional intelligence. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, actually funny that you say that. So yeah, when I wrote my book, which is called The Burnout Solution, I take the reader through this journey of these 7 steps. And as I was reading your book, I realized there's so much overlap between what we talk about. So like just off the cuff, you talk about emotional intelligence and everything associated with that, like having more self-awareness so that you know if you're being toxic and what's happening, right? And then you talk about resilience and you talk about communication. There's just like so much overlap. So I see like so much, synchronicities between what we do and how we do it. So I love that. And so, like, I think just like you talked about in your book, I think it's important for us to not just be aware of how we're feeling because of external circumstances like our boss, our manager, other people that we work with, but also like, what are we bringing to the table? And funny enough, like when it comes to burnout, I find that people often come to me when they're burned out and that finger is pointed out at all those externals, right? And when we do some digging, it turns out that for the majority of my clients, at least, that it's often things that they're bringing to the table that are causing that burnout, right? So sometimes it's like true that you have this big workload and that's making you feel like really stretched thin. But I find that one of the biggest reasons my folks burn out is because they tend to be perfectionists. So they're putting all that extra pressure on themselves, that then when you're like so focused over here, you're procrastinating on everything else and everything's building up. And so, that happens. There's also this really strong need to prove your worth through your productivity. So we talk about high achievers. It's like their whole identity is wrapped up in needing to perform, needing to achieve, needing to accomplish. And that creates a lot of pressure because there's this like lie that they tell themselves that goes like this: when I finish this, then I'll finally be able to relax, enjoy myself, fill in the blank. And then of course, what we know actually happens is they finish this and they're like, but there's 100 other things I have to do. And that's like a perpetual cycle that just keeps on going. So they just can't ever turn it off.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's like toxic work environments obviously cause burnout along with too much work and all of the things. But I I don't know that I've necessarily heard that perspective before, but it's very true. I mean, and I even talk about it, but just this kind of reframing, I talk about it in the book that you have to, if you're being bullied, for example, that you have to take ownership of that problem and that you can blame them and let it take you out, or you can decide that you're going to deal with this problem in a logical way and create a plan for yourself, be it to exit or go to HR, whatever it is. And so the first version of that, where this person's just going to take you out because they're bullying you, that would cause burnout over maybe the more controlled version of like, I'm taking my power back. So that does make a lot of sense. I think it's definitely kind of in the organizational world, like who's responsible for solving burnout among the workforce? Because I see a lot of organizations giving, like a class, we're going to have Dr. Grossman. She's going to come and talk about burnout and give you some tips. But on the flip side, if the organization is giving you so much work and maybe they laid people off and didn't replace them, so now all that work's been dispersed to the people left over, and you have a toxic boss and you have a demanding client, that while those nice trainings and things are great, that also there's a root cause that maybe the organization needs to take a look at. So it's like, who's responsible for it? I think the answer is both the organization and the people themselves, right?
Yeah. So in a way, if you're going to think about it as a both and, right? Yeah. It's like, I represent, in this conversation, I represent the individual and like you doing something for yourself in order to get out of burnout. And then you're representing the organization. It's like, what do we need to do as an organization to minimize the amount of burnout that we're seeing? And I would say if you are seeing a ton of burnout in your organization, chances are you're probably overlooking something. And to your point, doing like a one-off training is like a check the box kind of thing. It's not really going to move the needle, right? And I see this because I work with people over the course of 12 weeks. And it's a process where they're having to think differently. They're going to have to like build new habits, right? So change doesn't happen in 2 hours. It happens over the course of time, where there's got to be a back and forth, and we got to think about like what's going on, what's getting in the way. Here's the new thing. Now you've got to apply it. What's coming up when you're trying to apply it, and constantly this back and forth checking in with people about what is going on today that's different from yesterday, and what are you doing differently, and what could you do, and problem solving, and getting them to a point where they feel more in control, but don't have to always be in control, which is a very big difference, right? So usually people are burning out because they're holding on too tight. And that's like perfectionism. That's like, I don't want to make a mistake, so I'm not really making decisions, and I'm postponing everything, and I'm like hemming and hawing over everything. And we see a lot of that of like, I need to control, I need to like have everything exactly the way it's supposed to be. And there's a lot of fear. It's like a fear-driven mechanism. And really, like I always tell people, if you strip away everything, like I got a book of like 400 pages here, right? So like there's a lot in here. But if you're gonna just narrow it down to one thing, I would say the one thing that is the most powerful thing that you can walk away with is getting to the point where you don't have to problem solve for everything, and you don't have to like plan ahead for every potential scenario, but get to a point where you can just trust yourself. And then no matter what shows up, you'll figure it out. And we get out of this place of anxiety and having to know everything and having to control everything, and then just being in control.
I love that. That resonates with me quite a bit. I think about conversations I have with my young kids, and one thing that I feel like I'm pretty good at is like, I started my business 16 years ago, and every day I work towards it. So I have this one main goal that's to keep growing and helping clients, but the path certainly evolves, and I keep trying new things. And so I talk to my kids about that, like set a goal, but and then create some steps for yourself. But it could easily change, and you have to be okay with it. Or if you miss a step, maybe it's a good step to miss and you didn't need it anyway, or maybe you'll learn from it. Or I think that ability to adapt towards, and whenever I'm talking about like resilience, I was kind of liken it to like, if you fall in a well and you're looking up, you're in a hole in some way, then you could say, I'm going to hold on to this rock and then this rock and then this rock as I climb out, but that may not work. Maybe that rock falls, or you start, and it's like keep changing paths to pull yourself out. Jenny, I'm going to speak. Jenny, who's my team member, who's on here, my marketing. We did a webinar for Achieve Engagement or a panel, and we were talking about burnout. And so, Jenny, if you can find it and post it in the comments, we started with a TikTok that we showed that was like this guy like, hey, everybody, we're going to help you with with burnout. And then it's all these different employees like, we're going to get more time off. No. We're going to get less work. No. You're hiring more people. No. We get vacation? No. Then what is it? We're going to have a webinar on burnout.
So funny that you mentioned that, because I was in Ohio last week helping a client, and he was saying how his company is not efficient. And so he brought me in to help make them efficient. And one of the things that we're working towards is how do you get the best thing for the company while also giving the best thing to the employees? And where we landed, which I think is actually so cool, is people don't want more money. They want more time.
Yep.
Right. So we were like, what do you guys need in order to get your job done in 4 days so that you can take Fridays off? And that was like the mission, is like, go figure it out, come back, tell us, and then we're going to give you the tools, give you the things, and then you can get your work done. It's a win-win, right? Because now the company gets to be more efficient. We make sure everything's getting done, and we're preventing burnout because people are able to have a 3-day weekend instead of a 2-day weekend. So everybody's motivated, everybody's engaged, everybody's like happy to have that. And it's a competitive advantage for any company to offer that. So I love this concept where we're taking care of your people and the company, and it really is the biggest win-win.
Yeah. The question I often ask my clients is, how is the organization in terms of its processes and systems and how it behaves? How is the organization helping or hindering your people to get to that, whatever the goal is? So if the goal is to create a respectful work environment, that's why you hired me. Well, what's going on that's helping or hindering that? And then helping departments start to analyze their own systems to look at inefficiencies, or where could this process be more, have the core values more ingrained in this process. And onboarding is a simple one of like, if here's our 5 core values, does the process itself actually live those core values? Or do you just talk about the core values on day 1 during lunch with the HR person, and so you can do that in everything. So I similarly, it's like looking at how the organization behaves as an entity and its systems is super important. So,
yeah. I mean, I think to your point, we don't just create it once and forget it.
Yeah.
I work with organizations on taking those core values and translating them into behaviors that we then remind the employees about on a daily basis in those like quick daily huddles that we encourage team members to hold, so that we continue to communicate and drill in exactly what the expectations are. And this is part of the culture, right?
Yeah. And it's the expectation for the people and for the organization itself. Good. Annalise, or I said Annalise, that's my daughter's name. Jenny, holy moly. Jenny posted that link. But I think it's the organization too. Core values are for people. Hey, people, this is the expectation for how you behave, but also this is how our systems and processes behave. So if one of your core values is efficiency, then your processes need to be efficient. If one of your core values is collaboration, then all of the processes should be collaborative to the extent that they're still efficient, So yeah, I love that we're definitely on the same page. Do you ever work with like the positive intelligence, the saboteurs? Because you were kind of talking about it earlier with the perfectionism and things.
I did study that. I don't incorporate it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Not to that granular level, but I do when I'm doing my more like one-on-one coaching, we do look at specific behaviors that people are doing that sabotage their success.
Okay.
And again, it comes down to our beliefs and our fears that drive everything. So like when you see a specific behavior in place, or sometimes you don't even notice the behavior, but you just see the result. Like, how come every time I I always get this same result? Then there's probably something there, right? So then we start to explore, well, what are you doing? And what do you believe about this? And, what are you scared of? And then we kind of land on it. And then we're like, so this is self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so what do you want instead? Right. And then we have to reverse engineer what we feel, what we think about in order to accomplish that result. So I do a lot of that kind of thinking model with people to figure those things out. And I love it because it's so empowering. Like people don't connect the dots, so they don't realize how much power they actually have over their outcomes, because they just think like they don't have control over certain things, and things are random, or they don't realize that when they do this, they end up over here. So it's just like helping people connect the dots and seeing how, you need to change your thinking in order to have this kind of emotion, which drives this kind of behavior, which leads to this kind of result, is super empowering. So I love it.
It is. And we were talking earlier about high achievers, they're often bullies too. Not every high, it's not mutual. It doesn't, just because you're a high achiever doesn't mean you're a bully, but that is a common thread that I see. And to your point that they're really focused on performance and, that's their identity. What I find with those individuals is they've started to kind of see the world as either competent or not competent. And either you're a performer or you're not a performer. And that then does them a disservice, because once they've decided you're not a performer because you made a mistake or you move too slow or you don't do things the way that they want you to do it, that, well, now you're incompetent or you're not a performer and I'm dismissing you. And if you do talk to me, I'm going to make it very uncomfortable for you by bullying you, right? And of course, that's all subconscious. They're not thinking about any of that. And so I get to help them see that they're sabotaging their leadership by, and it's kind of like, hey, you really pride yourself on being a top performer. The feedback I'm getting from the interviews I did is that you are a top performer with the job, but you are not a top performer with your leadership. And
that's so different, right? And I actually find that those people are the ones that get promoted based on being a high performer. But when they get into leadership, they have no training on how to do that part of their job. So that's really on the organization to fill in that gap. And I find that organizations are like, oh, well, now we have somebody to do that job. And then they just disappear. It's like, okay, run forth and do good. And it's like, that doesn't
yeah. And they've been rewarded for their performance, but by default, they're also being rewarded for their behavior. And so when I'm called in to coach these individuals because some horrible thing happened, somebody filed a hostile work environment complaint, or many others. I've coached a few who caused a panic attack in somebody. Talk about burnout and the physical toll, but and they're sort of like, I don't understand why I need a coach, why I have to go through this. Like, I've always managed this way, kind of like, they don't say it out loud, but kind of like, I've been rewarded for it. What's wrong? And just helping them see that. And we also added coaching that individual's boss, who's often the CEO, because they are part of the reason that person engages in that behavior. They weren't holding 100%. Them accountable.
Yeah, for sure. That's important, right? So it's like you have to do bottom up and top down in terms of leadership to make sure that everything's flowing in the right direction. Everybody's aligned with those company values that we talked about. And so, yeah, like everything that you do inside your organization is part of your culture, and your culture is the most important thing that people basically like forget about or neglect because they're so focused on getting stuff done.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you can't ignore this because that's the glue.
Yep. We're on the same page. So I want to talk about your book a little bit. One of my favorite, so first of all, I really do not love theoretical books where it's like at the end of every chapter, even every page almost, like just give me the to-do list. And I think a lot of people are moving that direction if they weren't already too, because we don't have time to read theories. So I love that your book is full of to-dos, and I like the perspective. You talk about the hierarchy of needs and the fact that burnout, sort of inhibits your ability to meet those needs, which is kind of what you were saying earlier, that emotional intelligence has to come into play. Like, what are my needs and how am I sabotaging them? Yeah. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah. So one thing to understand about burnout, which I think is really important before we talk about really anything, is that burnout, a great way to understand it is like when people understand stress more than they understand burnout. So I just use that as an opening. What stresses you out is going to be different than what stresses me out. We can be in the same situation and, I'll get stressed out and you won't, or vice versa. Right. Or even if we're both stressed out about it, like I might be at an 8 out of 10, you might be at a 3.
Yeah.
Right. So if we think about burnout as being chronic stress over time, then we've got to look at how is that turning out? And not only do people get burned out for different reasons, when they get burned out, it shows up differently for everybody. So it's actually like very personal. Right? Your burnout picture is going to be different from everybody else's burnout picture. Right. So we have to understand really what does yours look like. And what's so beautiful about that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that it's basically saying, like, in order to reach the next level, right? So the top of the pyramid is about really like hitting your maximum potential. Right. And if you're a high achiever, that's where you want to be, where you just like, you're so fulfilled and you're living the dream, right? You have your purpose, your why, you love what you do, and you're thriving. And that's what we're really here to talk about, is how do you thrive? And until you get to that top of the pyramid, you are going up the ladder in terms of getting this need met, getting this need met, getting this need met. And what I find is, like, when we're not at the top, it means that we're still, like, not all our needs have been met. So first of all, having that pyramid where it actually tells you categories of like level 1, level 2, level 3, you start to figure out, like, where am I in this process? And if I know I'm on level 3, then what I need to work towards is something that meets level 4, that sort of idea, right? And if you boil it down, what I find is when it comes to the workplace, as we're talking also about culture, the 3 most significant things that people want to feel, right? Because as they say, it's not, we don't remember like what somebody did or said. It's how you feel. And it's the same at work. It's how we feel at work is going to create the experience. And that's what the culture does, is affects how people feel. Right. And that's where we get the loyalty. That's where we get retention. So let me go back because I'm like all over the place.
No, I love it.
So the 3 things are a sense of belonging, a sense of achievement, and a sense of relevance. Right. So we can look at the pyramid and say there's so many needs, but I mean, ultimately we've all met level 1. We all have clothing and shelter and food. So we've all met the basic necessities. We all have a job, so we've got income coming in and things like that. So now it's like, once you meet the basic stuff, you're not in survival mode. Now it's how do you get from surviving to thriving? And that's where you go through the next 3 levels, right? And part of that is a sense of belonging has to do with relationships, and the relationships have to do with communication. And you talk a lot about that in your book as well. So how, if you're the leader, how are you making your team feel appreciated?
Yeah.
Right. And I find that especially those leaders that get promoted, like we talked about, that don't have the training, they don't understand what leadership means. And so I'll say to them, you know, are you appreciating your team members? And they're like, well, they get paid to do this work. Why do I need to thank them for it? That's what they get the salaries for. And I'm like, we're not robots.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, it's true that we get paid to do the work. But at the end of the day, I need that human connection. I need to know I'm looking up to my manager. I need to know that my manager sees me. I want to feel seen. I want to feel valued. So when I work extra hard on something and I do a good job, I crave that feedback from you.
Me too. Publicly. I want you to say in front of everyone. Yeah.
You know, I saw how hard you worked on that. Excellent job. We're really, really happy with the work you did, blah, 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 blah. So then I am more motivated to work harder for you as we keep going. But if I work really hard and you're like, okay, great, here's another thing to do.
Right.
I'm like, I could have just checked a box. I could have just given you my minimum, effort here. Why am I killing myself? So those are the questions that people are asking. And here's the cool thing is a lot of this stuff doesn't cost money.
Right.
For the company, right? It's really just, how do you engage with your people in a way where they feel that sense of belonging, the sense of achievement, and that sense of relevance. And a lot of it has to do with your communication. It has to do with the frequency of communication. It has to do with really understanding the human psychology behind work and behind leadership. And so that's what I love to teach, both in terms of burnout prevention and in terms of burnout recovery and leadership and all that. So hopefully that's answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And I was writing some notes because what I just had an epiphany while you were talking. We used to talk a lot about engagement. I haven't talked about it in a while, but I might bring it back around, that in the way that we define engagement at Civility Partners, based on some different surveys we've done with clients, and this, I forget what it's called, the statistical analysis. I don't do the analytics on the survey data, but my analyst came up with the idea that, or through, what is that called? You would know, you're a doctor. When you do a survey and then things end up grouping together, is it factor analysis?
Factor analysis, yeah.
What we figured out through a bunch of our surveys with clients is that engagement is essentially efficacy, which is appropriately challenged, fit, or feeling like you belong there. And I'm just realizing that it all sits right there at the top of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs as you were talking. And I think like Gallup defines engagement as enthusiasm, but there's gonna be some blog posts on engagement and the Maslow's hierarchy of needs so thanks for that epiphany. I appreciate it.
And I would say engagement is not, I don't think of it really as enthusiasm. I think enthusiasm is a nice to have, but it's not a must have. I think people are engaged when they understand the why.
Yeah.
And there's some buy-in. And so the question is, if you're the leader, how do you get people to buy in? Now, in the example I just shared for my client, the buy-in is you get your work done, you get Friday off. I'm bought into that because I want my Friday off, right?
Yeah.
I might not like the work as much on this particular task versus that task. It kind of doesn't matter. It's like if I see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is my Friday off, I'm just going to power through. I become more engaged in the work because
I want to get
that buy-in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I might not be enthusiastic about the task. I might be enthusiastic about getting it done. So there's a bit of a difference there, right?
Right. I agree. I don't love Gallup. I know they're worldwide being used, but Yeah, I don't love that definition either. And I always tell clients, if you're doing an engagement survey, your vendor's deciding what engagement even means. If you're just looking at vendors based on like ease of use or whatever, like you might want to start by defining what engagement even means. And also on that topic, an engagement survey only measures engagement. It doesn't tell you about the culture. So we have been into countless clients that do engagement surveys and the scores are fine. And we have an engagement construct on our survey that we use, but we're looking at a bunch of other things too. And we'll find that indeed on our own engagement construct in our survey, they're getting high scores, but they're also saying things like, I'm not given information to grow. I experience toxic behaviors. I don't trust my boss, and so engagement gets at one component, but there's a lot of other things to be looking at. One of our clients was like, they were like, we're getting the Gallup survey scores. We've had an average of like 4.8 for the last like 3 or 4 years, but then we do our survey and engagement scores were pretty great. But then 30% of the workforce had witnessed harassment in the last year, according to our survey.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I think what's important is not so much engagement, because people can be really engaged, but in all the wrong things.
Yeah.
Right.
Very great point.
So I think a better thing to look at is one, KPIs. Are people getting their stuff done?
Yeah.
Because then you're like, okay, if they're getting it done, they're engaged, clearly. But if they're engaged and they're not getting their KPIs, then what good is that number for me? Like, at the end of the day,
I'm on a mission to like get like engagements all the rage right now. And I'm like, to your point, and you're missing a whole lot when you just look at that, because that's what the world tells you you're supposed to be looking at. But go ahead.
I was going to add one point, and then the other piece, other than KPIs, is you want to look at satisfaction.
Yeah.
So what's the mood, right? What you have some sort of a barometer where you're tapping into how are people feeling. That's more important to me than how engaged they might be in the task. So
well, our survey looks at we have 5 constructs: job satisfaction, employee engagement, communication effectiveness, internal relationships between your team and the leaders, and feelings of inclusivity. So that's what we look at. We've developed that survey over time through many clients, and we have come to see that that's really what we think defines engagement, and then we can help the organization make really good change with that data and all of that. Well, it was a real pleasure to have you. We could probably sit here and talk about this stuff all day, but we've got things to do. Thank you for ordering my book. What was there?
These books gotta go together. It's the individual and the organization, and I think they're both really important. They're both monster books with tons of resources. So if you're out there and you're like, I don't know what to do, well, you've got everything. And I would say, if you're in HR, you got to read this book. HR people, this is your Bible. I mean, Catherine, you have put so much just blood, sweat, and tears into that book that I'm like, everybody needs to have a copy.
Oh, thank you.
If you're in HR and you don't have a copy, you're not doing your job.
I think so too, but we're getting there. Well, your book is great as well. So if you want some tangible tips on burnout or getting through toxic work environment, order both. And they make a nice set. Christmas is coming. So, well, thank you again for being here with me. Thanks all for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Bye.